Hey, it's Marissa. Today we're talking about how to talk to buyer and seller clients about commissions amidst the commission lawsuits. First, we're going to go through how to talk to buyers. Okay, raise your hand if you like to do work and not get paid for it. Nobody? Okay, great. Here's how we're going to get paid. Having a buyer consultation at the very beginning of your buyer's home search is going to be key in this process. So getting all of your ducks in a row before you even go see houses is a great way to make sure that you have everything covered and that your client knows what to expect. These lawsuits were all about commission transparency, or lack thereof, I should say. So sitting down with your buyer and talking about the entire process and being very clear and upfront about how commissions work is going to make the process so much easier. So with these lawsuits, a buyer agency agreement is going to be required before you even show a buyer a house. So having the buyer consultation, going over the home buying process, and going over the buyer agency agreement is going to be your very first step before you go see houses. And at the end of your buyer consultation, when you bring up the agreement and you go through it, here's what you're gonna say. So I'm gonna get to the commission section on my agency agreement, and I'm gonna say, I charge X% of the purchase price to work with buyers. Now, in our marketplace, it's pretty common for the seller to at least contribute something to the buyer's agent, but in the event that they don't contribute as much as I charge, or they don't contribute anything at all, you're just agreeing to cover the difference. Now, I've already had this conversation with all of the buyers that I have worked with since the beginning of this year, and I have never received a bad response about this. Of course, you do always have to be prepared for the worst, but for the most part, all of my buyers have been like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. You know, I'm using you as a service. You are providing services to me and taking time out of your day to work with me to find a home, and you're being my trusted advisor. It makes sense that I would have to pay you. So they usually don't have a problem with it in my experience. Another thing to take into consideration, which this is my understanding of the lawsuits and how everything is going to be moving forward into the future. Correct me if I'm wrong. I will update in the comments if anything has changed by the time that I have filmed this video. But it is my understanding that you cannot receive any more commission than that is stated in the buyer agency agreement. So let's say that a seller is offering 0.5% more than what is in your buyer agency agreement. That amount will likely go to buyer closing costs, or they could use it for buying down the rate or their down payment, anything that they want, but it will not go to you as the buyer's agent. I also think it's going to be really important to call the listing agent before the showings and see if there's any sort of compensation that the seller is offering to the buyer, so that the buyer knows upfront what they're in for. Okay, let's move on to sellers, and we're going to talk about why it's advantageous for them to still offer buyer agent compensation and why you need to be having that conversation with your sellers. It's going to be very, very easy for unprofessional agents to just totally forget this conversation and say, I charge X amount and you don't have to offer the buyer agent anything. So the conversation could end there, but we're not looking out for our peers. We're not looking out for the market as a whole. And this is why it's important for sellers to offer buyer agent compensation. Most important thing to keep into consideration is we need to make it about the seller and why it benefits the seller. So first thing is that they're gonna get more buyers at their listing. This market has been pretty tough for buyers, and affordability is not where it was in the past few years. Offering a buyer agent compensation is similar to any other incentive. So this would include home warranties, seller concessions, you name it. Another thing to prepare your sellers for is that there is a high chance that buyers could submit their offer asking for the seller to pay it anyway. I do think we're gonna see a little bit of that, and just making up the difference between what the seller is currently offering versus what your agent charges. My fear for these new lawsuits is that buyers are going to have to just forego asking for any buyer agent compensation and pay it themselves, just as a competitive tactic. So we are still very much in a seller's market. So this is another thing that I would communicate to sellers. The importance of offering buyer agent compensation is helping to make housing more affordable. So let's talk about how to actually have the conversation with sellers. When I sit down with the seller, I am going to tell them, this is what I charge for my services. This percentage is just me. And then we're gonna talk about what you wanna offer a buyer's agent. So I'm not even gonna say the whole, you can just offer them nothing nothing kind of thing. I'm gonna say, personally, I charge this amount when I work with buyers. So I would recommend that you offer between this percent and this percent. Originally, I was going to use the average buyer agent compensation from MLS and just show them, hey, here's the exact number of the comps. This is the average buyer agent compensation that we're seeing with the comparables. But then they decided to take it out of MLS. So this is how I am going around that. I'm saying this is what I would charge to work with a buyer, so I would recommend this range. You could also offer a flat amount as a seller concession to the buyer to use for whatever they want. If you get pushback from a seller, just remind them of those points that we talked about earlier. If you're here watching this video, it means that you care about doing a good job. So you're gonna do just fine. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a video. I post every Monday. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.